Hi students, welcome to PhD Jobs and Admission. This is Gauri. So in this video, I am going to teach you about research methodology syllabus of PhD entrance test at Dr. B.R.Ambedkar Open University. Okay, so in this video, I am going to teach you about top 50 plus MCQs on research methodology so that all of your doubts relevant to research methodology will get clear. But still, if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the comment box after viewing this video. Okay, so before starting this session, I want to tell you that Global Online team provides you complete course on research methodology. As in BRAOU PhD entrance test, you will be asked 50% MCQs on research methodology. So if you want to qualify PhD entrance test, then you need to score more marks in research methodology. So with the help of this course, you can score more marks in research methodology and qualify PhD entrance test. So students, in this course we are providing you full syllabus video lectures under which theory and MCQ lectures both are available. You will get full syllabus notes and mock tests. You will get more than 1500 MCQs revision PDF, and all of these study materials are available in both the languages, Hindi and English. So basically students, we have 10 mock tests like this, and each mock test contains 40 MCQs, and that's why overall you can solve 400 MCQs in mock test only. And by the use of this revision PDF, you can revise all the topics in a single PDF, and you will be getting 80% MCQs from this revision PDF only out of 100% MCQs in research methodology section of BRAOU PhD entrance test. And over here, the topics that I have mentioned, like research aptitude, communication, data interpretation, information and communication technology, all of these topics are covered, okay, in this complete course, and these topics are there in the syllabus of your research methodology section of PhD entrance test. Okay, so students, if you want to buy this course, then you can either download the Global Online app from the Play Store. For that, I have given the link in the description box of this video, or else you can contact me through these WhatsApp numbers. Okay, and the course fees are really very less, which are only 699 rupees. And in such a low course fees, we are providing you step by step guidance at your each and every step of PhD admission at BRAOU, and as well Global Online team provides you 100% passing guarantee that you can guaranteed qualify the PhD entrance test. Okay.
Question 1 is, which of the following does not correspond to characteristics of research? So here we have given some characteristics of research, and from these four options there is one option which is not a characteristic of research, and we are going to select that option. So let us see. Research is not passive, research is systematic, research is not a problem oriented, research is not a process. So basically students, research means we are going to solve any kind of a problem, okay, through a systematic procedure. So basically within the research we are going to follow a proper scientific method, and that's why research is not passive. Basically research is active, okay, because whatever we are doing over here is through our active mode, and here we want the empirical evidence. I mean to say, we based upon on the observations, and then after that subsequent measurements, and then we finally get the results of our research problem. And that's why research is not passive, and that's why this is active, and that's why this is one of the characteristic of research. And research is always systematic. It means that we properly follow step by step in the research process, and these steps are nothing but overall scientific method, and that's why research is always systematic, which is again the characteristic of a research. Research is not a problem oriented. It means that research is solution oriented, because we already have the problem and we need to solve that problem, and for that process we need a research, okay, and that's why research is basically solution oriented. It is not a problem oriented, and that's why again this is a characteristic of research. Research is not a process. As I have told you earlier that research is always a process because it's a long lasting procedure in which lots of steps are there, and we are going to see these steps in the next upcoming videos. So basically students, research is always a process which is a systematic process, and that's why the correct answer to this question is 4, because research is not a process, is not a characteristics of research. Okay, that's why this is the correct answer for this question. A research problem is feasible only when. So when the research problem is feasible, what are these conditions? After that only we think that research problem is feasible. So let us see the options. It has utility and relevance. It means that research problem should have a utility. It means that it should be useful for our future generation. Okay, it should have relevance. It means that research problem should have the relevance to the problems within the society. Whatever there are problems within the society, okay, these problems should be our research problem. So it means that research problem has some kind of relationship with the society, okay, or specifically problems in the society. So after that only we can say that research problem is feasible. So this is the option when we can say that research problem is feasible. It is new and adds something to knowledge. Yes, research problem should be new, okay, and it should be original always, and research problem should add something to our existing knowledge. Okay, and after that only we say that research problem is feasible. Research is researchable. It is really the most important concept. If somehow the research problem is not researchable, then obviously you cannot do the research further, and that's why research problem should be researchable, and after that it will be feasible. Okay, so this is another option when the research problem is feasible, and that's why the correct answer to this question is 4, that is all of the above, because in all of these above situations research problem is feasible. Okay, authenticity of a research finding is its. So what is the authenticity of a research finding? Okay, so basically students, authenticity means that we have the proper proof that this particular object or thing is authenticate, it is original, it is not copied from somewhere else. Okay, this is called as the authenticity. And what is exactly the authenticity of a research finding? It means that whenever we get the results of our research, so how you can say that our research results are authenticate. So whether it is its validity or its objectivity or originality or all of the above. So this question is somehow tricky students. So let us see how. So basically students, validity means that to what extent, okay, to what extent your results are are that much true, so that you can generalize your results to the other situations. It means that validity comes in two concepts, and it means internal validity and external validity. So within the internal validity, okay, we define it as the data that we use in our research, okay, how that data is valid, okay, or how that data is extendable to valid to our research results. And within the external validity, it means that how or too much, or how too much extent, okay, our results of the research we can generalize to the other situations. Okay, to what extent basically we can generalize the results of our research to the other situations. So exactly the meaning of validity, what is that? Now I hope so all of you understood, and that's why validity is not the authenticity of a research finding. Okay, now next is objectivity. Objectivity means bias free. Okay, whatever you are doing is fairly, and you have a proper objective behind it. Okay, and this is the authenticity of a research finding. Okay, so whenever you have a objectivity in your research process, then ultimately you will include the validity into it. And that's why validity is the somehow the concept which is under the concept of objectivity, and that's why authenticity of a research finding is its objectivity, and that's why the correct answer to this question is 2. Okay, now what is originality? So again, originality means that it is original, it is not duplicate, it is not like we have copied it from somewhere else. So again, originality, this is the concept which comes under objectivity, because objectivity is a bigger concept. Okay, and it includes validity and as well originality, and that's why the correct answer to this question is objectivity, not all of the above. Because you can give the authenticity of a research finding in terms of its objectivity, not its validity, and not its originality. Okay, all of you getting? I hope all of you understood, but still if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the comment box. Okay, now here students, we have given two sets, set 1 and set 2, and in set 1 they have given us research types, and in set 2 they have given characteristics of each research type, and here we have to match the correct characteristics to the correct research type. Okay, now here there are fundamental research, then applied research, action research, evaluative research. So these are basically the types of research which we have given in set 1. Now let us see what are the characteristics that they have given us. Finding out the extent of perceived impact of an intervention. Okay, it means that whenever you get the effects, okay, of your research, then how the causes, okay, how the causes, okay, causing that much amount of effect. So whenever there is increase in cause, then how much effect it will be having, or whenever you decrease the cause, then how much effect you will be having. So this is the meaning of this first statement. Okay, developing an effective explanation through theory building. So basically here you are going to develop a theory, and whenever you are developing the theory, then through this process you are going to provide an effective explanation of your research results. Okay, improving an existing situation through use of interventions. So here whatever existing situation in front of you, so you are going to only improve that existing situation through the use of different actions, and those actions are nothing but the interventions. Okay, exploring the possibility of a theory for use in various situations. It means that whenever you are doing any research process to solve any research problem, then in that situation you are going to apply some theory or principle or laws, so that you will get easily the results of your research. Okay, and enriching technological resources. So basically students, fundamental research is the basic research or pure research. So within the fundamental research we formulate a theory. So this is the main objective of fundamental research, to formulate a theory. And whenever here we formulate the theory, in that case we basically tell the effective explanation behind it, that what we are formulating, why we are formulating a theory. Okay, and that's why fundamental research is basically goes for, okay, second option, developing an effective explanation through theory building, because here there is only one option in which we are building a theory. It means that we are formulating a theory, and that's why fundamental research goes for second option. Within the applied research we basically apply the various principles, laws or theories to the problems whatever we are solving. Okay, and that's why applied research will go for fourth option, exploring the possibility of a theory for use in various situations. Next is action research. So within the action research we solve the existing problems, okay, through our interventions or through our through our immediate actions upon it. And that's why C will go for third option, improving an existing situation through use of interventions. And the last one is evaluative research, so of course it will go for 1 because we are evaluating something. Okay, so here we are evaluating exactly how much extent of causes having the that much extent of effect on the effects. Okay, and that's why D will go for first, that is finding out the extent of perceived impact of an intervention. I know the language is somehow difficult to understand, but try to understand the meaning of that sentence, then after that you will understand everything. And enriching technological resources, so this thing basically does not occur in any kind of research type, and whenever we want to enrich the technological resources, this is basically, you can say, whenever we collect any data for a research, so this thing will comes under that. Okay, that's why this option is not associated with any kind of research type, and that's why this gets eliminated. Okay, so the correct answer should be 1 because here A will go for 2, B will go for 4, C will go for 3, and D will go for 1. Okay. Next is, which one among the following statements is correct in context to research? So here we have given 4 statements which are relevant to research, and we are going to find out the correct statements which are relevant to research. So now let us see one by one these statements. Research refers to a series of systematic activity or activities undertaken to find out the solution to a problem. So this is really very easiest, and we have saw lot of times that what is exactly research. So research is a systematic activity because here we follow the scientific procedure and we do the research because we want the solution to our problem, and that's why the first statement is correct in context to research. Now second is, it is a systematic, logical and unbiased process wherein verification of hypothesis, data analysis, interpretation and formation of principles can be done. Yes, this is as well the correct statement in regards to research, because research is always systematic, it is logical because here we think logically. As well, this is unbiased. Unbiased means whatever we do here which is fairly, and as well here we basically verify the hypothesis that we have created, we do the data analysis, we interpret the data, and as well we form here different kinds of principles as well. Okay. Now third one is, it is an intellectual inquiry or quest towards truth. Yes, research is an intellectual inquiry towards the truth. This is correct statement regarding research, and it enhances knowledge. Yes, through the research we are going to enhance our knowledge because we do lot of things whenever we are under doing the research, and that's why this is also correct. So the correct answer to this question is 1 because here all of these statements are correct in regard to research. Okay. Research problem is selected from the standpoint of. So from whose standpoint of we should select the research problem? So first is social relevance. Social relevance means whatever there are the problems within the society. So through the standpoint of that problems in the society, we should select the research problem, or through the financial support, or through the researcher's interest or availability of relevant literature. So students, the correct answer to this question should be 1 because we do the research, okay, because we need to solve the problems which are there in the society. Okay, I know researchers' interest is as well more important thing, but apart from researchers' interest, the most important thing is that social relevance. Okay, so whenever we have a social relevance to the research problem, then the research problem is feasible, and that we have seen in this video, okay, earlier. And that's why we should select the research problem through the standpoint of social relevance and not researchers' interest. Okay, So we should give a priority to the social relevance than the researcher's interest. So the correct answer should be 1. Next is, what are those conditions where a research problem is not viable? So what are those conditions in which research problem is not viable? So first is, it is new and adds something to knowledge. Yes, in this situation research problem is viable, so this is eliminated. It can be researched, it means that it should be researchable, so this is as well eliminated, because under these situations research problem is actually viable. But we have asked that whenever it is not viable. Okay, it has utility and relevance. Yes, under this situation as well it is viable, so this is eliminated. It contains dependent and independent variables. Yes, so under this situation research problem is not viable. Okay, and that's why the correct answer to this question is 4. Okay, which one among the following phrases does not correspond to the meaning of research as a process? So from these options, which is the phrase which does not correspond to the meaning of research as a process? So whether it is problem solving, whether it is trial and error, or objective observation, or systematic activity. So problem solving is basically a whole process in which we solve the problem through different steps, and that's why this is nothing but a process, and problem solving correspond to the meaning of research as a process, so this option gets eliminated. Trial and error means here we repetitively do the experiments. Okay, it means that we do the trials and after that we get the errors, then whenever we get the errors then again we repeat the same experiment, and this is nothing but a process. Okay, this is nothing but a process, or you can say it's a method, and that's why this is again the meaning of research as a process, so this gets eliminated. Now objective observation is the data collection method, and in which we fairly observe the participants. Okay, and that's why this is not a process, this is not a process, this is the data collection method, and that's why this is the correct answer to this question, because it is not correspond to the meaning of research as a process. Okay, so objective observation is the part of a research process. Okay, it is not a whole research process, and that's why the correct answer to this question is 3. And now systematic activity, obviously through this word you can understand that this is a whole process and it corresponds to the meaning of research as a whole process. So this is again eliminated, and that's why the correct answer is 3. Which of the following is not a characteristic feature of research process? So again here you have given 4 options, and from these 4 options, which is a characteristic, which is not a characteristic feature of research process? So whether it is empirical approach, systematic endeavor, uncontrolled conditions, critical analysis. So empirical approach means empirical method. It means that here we observe the data, and based upon the observations we measure the data, and after that we get the results. So here we have the proper evidence in terms of observations and measurements. This is nothing but the empirical method, and obviously within the research process we follow the empirical method. This is the one of the characteristic of research process, so this option gets eliminated. Systematic endeavor means systematic process, and as we have seen earlier in this video, research process is a systematic procedure in which we follow different steps in a sequentially manner, and as well it is a scientific method. So this is again the characteristic of research process, so this gets eliminated. Uncontrolled conditions, yes, so within the research process we have the controlled conditions, because under these controlled conditions we can manually manipulate the independent variables, and we get the effects on the dependent variables, and for that thing we need the controlled conditions for our variables under study. Okay, and that's why this is not a characteristic of research process, because a research process has the controlled conditions. Okay, so uncontrolled conditions is not a characteristic feature of research process. So this is the correct answer to this question. And now critical analysis is again one of the characteristic of research process, because whenever we get the data and after that we need to analyze our data. So this is basically the critical analysis technique. Okay, we critically analyze the data so that we get the authenticate results to our research, and that's why this is again the characteristic of research process. So it gets eliminated. So the correct answer is 3. Next is, which of the following sequences correctly reflects scientific investigation? Okay, so here we have given different options, and in each option they have given us different sequences, but we need to identify correct sequence of scientific investigation. So let us see: conceptualization, theorizing, deduced consequences, then observation and testing, testing, observation, conceptualization, theorizing and deduced consequences, theorizing, deducing consequences, testing, observing and conceptualization, observation, conceptualization, theorizing, deduced consequences and method to verify them. So basically students, first of all, within the scientific investigation, the first thing that we need to do is observation, because through the observation only we can identify the research problem in the society or the research problem in front of us, and that's why your first step should be observation. So from these options, only the fourth option is that in which first step is observation, and that's why your correct answer should be 4. And after that you do the conceptualization. It means that based upon the observation you collect the data, and whatever data you have, so based upon that data you try to making the concepts behind it, and after that you develop a theory. Then deduced consequences means whenever you develop a theory, after that you make up hypothesis, then you test the hypothesis, and finally you get the results. So this is nothing but deduced consequences, and after that there is a method to verify them. So for the verification thing, we basically test the hypothesis through different statistical techniques. Okay, so this is the question 1 is, what is the name of the conceptual framework in which the research is carried out? Okay, so what is the name of that conceptual framework? Through that conceptual framework, basically the research is carried out. So whether it is research hypothesis, or it is a synopsis of research, or it is research paradigm, or it is research design. So basically conceptual framework means the whole outline of the whole research process, which is nothing but the research design, and that's why your correct answer should be 4, because research design is the whole outline of your whole research process, in which you basically explain what are different research data collection methods and data analysis methods you are going to employ in your whole research process. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 4. Now the research hypothesis means the prediction of the solution of your research. Synopsis of research means the summary of your whole research in minimum words, so you can call it as abstract as well. Okay, then research paradigm means research approach, and research approach is nothing but the research method itself. Okay, next is, which one among the following statement is true in the context of the testing of hypothesis? Okay, so among these options, which is the statement which is true in relevant or in regard towards the testing of hypothesis? So it is only the alternative hypothesis that can be tested. So whenever we test the hypothesis, then at that time we only test the alternative hypothesis. It is only the null hypothesis that can be tested. So whenever we test the hypothesis, then there is only the null hypothesis that we test. Both the alternative and the null hypothesis can be tested. Both the alternative and the null hypothesis cannot be tested. So basically students, this thing is really most important. Whenever you test the hypothesis, then in that section basically you only test the null hypothesis. Okay, because the meaning of null hypothesis is that we basically state that there is no relationship between the variables under study, and that's why we test only the null hypothesis. And whenever we get the results, and whenever we get the results like we should accept the null hypothesis, then in that situation we accept it. And whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then in that situation we automatically accept the alternative hypothesis. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 2, that is, it is only the null hypothesis that can be tested. Okay, next is, in using the hypothetical deductive research paradigm, which of the following sequences is considered appropriate? Okay, so whenever you are using hypothetical deductive research approach, then for that using the approach, you need to go through simple steps. Okay, those are the research steps. So what are the sequences of these research steps? So first is hypothesis making, hypothesis testing, arriving at generalization and conclusion, establishing a research problem, hypothesis making, hypothesis testing, arriving at generalization and conclusion, hypothesis making, establishing a research problem, then hypothesis testing, then arriving at generalization and conclusion. Hypothesis testing, hypothesis making, finalizing the problem, arriving at generalization and conclusion. Okay, so your correct answer should be 2, because whenever you do any kind of a research, then your first step should be to establish a research problem. Okay, and that's why basically you need to identify first of all the research problem, then establish a research problem, then after that formulate a hypothesis, then test a hypothesis, then arrive at generalization, and last session will be of conclusion. Okay, so basically what the meaning of hypothetical deductive research paradigm? So basically in this research paradigm, you can see these two words, and those are hypothetical and deductive. So hypothetical means basically you are going to formulate the hypothesis, and deductive means you are going to test the hypothesis. So this is the meaning of these two sentence words. Okay, and that's why in this basic research paradigm, you need to first of all formulate the hypothesis, which is the mandatory thing, and the second thing is that deductive means basically you are going to test the hypothesis. That's why your correct answer should be 2, that is this one. Okay, a college or university teacher plans to test his or her substantive research hypothesis in a major project. Which of the following statements are considered relevant in this regard? Okay, so college or university teacher, okay, is planning to test his or her substantive research hypothesis. Okay, so basically here he wants to test substantive research hypothesis, and research hypothesis means alternative hypothesis. So in this hypothesis we state that, or we predict that there is relationship between the variables. Okay, so with regard to this hypothesis testing part, okay, which of these following statements are correct? Substantive research hypothesis has to clearly specify the relationship among variables. Okay, so basically whenever we formulate the substantive research hypothesis, then that research hypothesis should clearly specify the relationship among the variables those are under study, and this statement is correct, because whenever we know the exactly relationship among the variables, then obviously our research hypothesis will be more clear, and it will help us to specifically test it. Okay, second is research hypothesis may be directed at finding out differential effects or relationships. Okay, research hypothesis may be directed at finding out differential effects or relationships. Okay, again this statement is correct, because research hypothesis should be directed at finding out differential effects or relationships, because this is basically the outcome of our research process, and that we want basically, and this is the goal of our whole research. null hypothesis should be formulated beforehand. So here we are going to test the research hypothesis, and that's why beforehand we don't need to formulate a null hypothesis. So this statement is incorrect. There is direct support available for testing the substantive research hypothesis. No, basically this thing does not happen in the research process, because whenever there is direct support available for testing the substantive research hypothesis, then this thing comes under unethical research process, and that's why this statement is again incorrect. The final decision of the on the research hypothesis may be reached indirectly by deciding the fate of the null hypothesis. Yes, this statement is correct, because whenever you reject the null hypothesis, then obviously automatically you accept the research hypothesis. Okay, and whenever you accept the null hypothesis, then you reject the research hypothesis, and that's why indirectly your decision will be based upon the fate of the null hypothesis itself. That's why your correct answer should be 4, that is A, B and E only, because here only these statements are correct. Next is research problem is feasible only when. So in which situations research problem is feasible? So when it is researchable, when it is new and adds something to knowledge, or when it has utility and relevance, and all of these. So basically students, research problem is feasible only when it is researchable. Whenever it is researchable, then obviously it will be feasible. When it new and whenever it adds something to knowledge, then obviously it will be feasible. And as well, whenever it has utility and relevance, relevance means whenever it has relevance to the problems in the society, then obviously it will be feasible. And that's why in all of these situations research problem is feasible, and that's why your correct answer should be 4, that is all of these. Okay, from the list given below, identify those which are called non-probability sampling procedures. Okay, so here we have given a different sampling procedures, and we need to identify which are the non-probability sampling procedures among these procedures. So basically there are two types of sampling procedures, and those are probability and non-probability sampling procedures. And probability sampling procedures means there we basically randomly assign the participants and randomly select the participants. But in the non-probability sampling procedures, we do not randomly select the participants. So here we do not randomly select the participants. Okay, so let us see here different sampling procedures: simple random sampling, dimensional sampling, snowball sampling, cluster sampling, quota sampling, stratified sampling. So from these sampling procedures, dimensional sampling, snowball sampling and quota sampling are the non-probability sampling procedures. Okay, because within the dimensional sampling, this is the extension of quota sampling, and here a participant are get selected because they have the those particular characteristics, and here researcher think about many characteristics such as gender, then age, etc. And here basically researcher select the participants based upon the different characteristics, and each participant should have those defined characteristics, and those are called as dimensional sampling, because here the characteristics are many but the participant is one. Okay, and that's why this is the extension of quota sampling. In the snowball sampling, a researcher inspires the participants which are already under study, okay, to ask the other participants, okay, to get into the study. So basically here a researcher ask the participants under study to invite their colleagues or their familiar people to get participated in the study. So this is called as the snowball sampling. And within the quota sampling, basically a researcher wants the specific people who has specific characteristics, and that's why those of these three are the non-probability sampling procedures, but here simple random sampling, then cluster sampling and stratified sampling, these are the probability sampling procedures, and that's why your correct answer should be 4, that is 2, 3 and 5. Okay, next is research design that needs to collect factual information on a continuing basis is classified as. Okay, so from these options, which is the research design that needs to collect factual information on a continuing basis? So whether it is longitudinal study design or pre and post study design, cross sectional study design or double control study design. So within this, the longitudinal study design is the study design that needs to collect factual information on a continuing basis, and that's why it should be your correct answer. Because in the longitudinal study design, okay, basically participants are to be called for a particular time interval, and that time interval is for a longer period of time or shorter period of time. It depends upon the study criteria, and on a interval basis, participants give the real information at that period of time to the researcher on a continuing basis. Okay, and that's why the correct answer to this question is longitudinal study design. In the pre and post study design, so basically over here, before and after treatments, the measurements are to be taken. Okay, and that's why it is called as the pre and post study design. Cross sectional study design is the study design in which a researcher takes the information from lots of participants at a one period of time. Okay, and in the double control study design, here there are two control groups and one experimental groups. Okay, and that's why it is called as the double control study design, and the correct answer is 1, that is longitudinal study design. A researcher intends to find out the differences in the motivational outcome or outlook of first degree level students in terms of their belongingness to rural or urban areas and the educational status of parents. What will be the dependent variable in this study? Okay, so here researcher intends to find out the differences in the motivational outlook of first degree level students based on their belongingness to either rural or urban areas and based on the educational status of their parents. So here basically a researcher wants to study the motivational outlook of first degree level students, and that's why here motivational outlook should be the dependent variable, because the variable which is under study or the effect variable over here is motivational outlook, and the independent variables are belongingness to rural or urban areas and educational status of their parents. Okay, and that's why here your correct answer should be 4, that is motivational outcome or motivational outlook, because dependent variable is the effect variable and it is basically depend upon the independent variables. So whenever we change the values of the independent variables, then automatically the values of the dependent variable will be changed. Okay, that's why your correct answer should be 4, that is motivational outlook. Next is the objective of exploring the existing literature should be to identify which of the following issues. Okay, so what is the objective of literature basically? Why we do the review of literature? So what is already known about this area, then what concepts and theories are relevant to this area, how to get funding for the research, what are the significant controversies in this area, then are there any inconsistencies in the findings of this area. So basically to reviewing the existing literature means we find out the theory or we find out the articles which are there published by other authors or other researchers before me or before us. Okay, and these literatures help us to understand the study, okay, whatever we are studying right now. And that's why we should know what is already known about this area, and that's why we review the existing literature as well. What concepts and theories are relevant to this area, we need to know that. So again this is again the objective of this. then what are the significant controversies in this area? We should know that. So for that, again, we do the review of existing literature, and again we need to know whether there are any inconsistencies, means whether there are any gaps in the findings of this area or not, and that's why we do the review of existing literature, and that's why your correct answer over here should be 3, that is A, B, D and E only. Okay. Next is, which of the following sampling techniques in research imply randomization and equal probability of drawing the units? So here they have asked you, from these sampling techniques, which is the sampling technique which has equal probability of getting selected to the all the participants. So basically all the participants have the equal probability to get selected in the study. So basically here we use the randomization formula to select the different participants to the study. So whether it is quota sampling, whether it is snowball sampling, whether it is stratified sampling, or whether it is dimensional sampling or cluster sampling. So here the probability sampling procedures are stratified and cluster sampling. As we have seen in this video only, ki quota, snowball and sampling, all of these are the non-probability sampling. Okay, and that's why the remaining options will be stratified and cluster sampling, and those are the probability sampling techniques, and that's why your correct answer should be C and E only. Okay, C and E only, stratified and cluster sampling. Okay. Question 1 is, dash includes data concerning the family background and educational development. So from these options, which is the research method or which is the data collection method which includes data which is relevant to the family background and educational development? So we have here different options: case study, general behavior, genetic approach and adequacy. So students, if you have seen all of these options, then you will understand that here only case study is the research method or it is the data collection method, and general behavior, genetic approach and adequacy, all of these are not any kind of a data collection method in research. Okay, so all of these options gets eliminated, and that's why your correct answer is case study. Okay, here it is very easy to understand the answer to this question because of the options are really very easy. But there is concept behind this, and this is that case study is a qualitative research method, and basically it involves in-depth study of single case from various angles. Okay, and data sources includes data regarding family and educational background mostly, and primary data collection methods are observation and conducting interviews over here. Okay, so this is nothing but the case study and the information about it, and that's why case study includes data which is relevant to the family background and educational development. Okay, which one of the following is a type of self-reporting technique? So from these options, which is the type of self-reporting technique? And we have the options: field analysis, questionnaire, case study, focus groups. So let us see first of all what is self-reporting technique. So basically students, self-reporting techniques of data collection uses surveys, questionnaires or polls where respondents read question and select a response by themselves without any interference from investigator. So basically self-reporting technique of data collection uses surveys, questionnaires and polls as the method of data collection, and that's why your correct answer over here should be questionnaire, because questionnaire is a type of self-reporting technique. Okay, and all of the other options like field analysis, case study and focus groups are the data collection methods, but they are not type of self-reporting technique, because within the field analysis basically researcher wants to understand the human behavior in their natural environment. Okay, in the case study, as we have seen earlier in this video, we are going to study in-depth information of a single person only, and within the focus groups there is a homogeneous groups and which has the participants which has the common characteristics. Okay, and that's why here your correct answer should be 2. Next is the techniques by which we can study an individual's personality by observing his or her style of life, behavior, manner, thoughts and feelings is called. So from these options, which is the technique by which we can study individual's personality by observing his or her style of life, by observing his or her style of behavior or his or her style of manner, thoughts and feelings. Okay, so whether the technique is inventory or case history or rating scale or projective. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is 2, because the correct answer is case history. So case history includes all relevant information or material, okay, which is gathered about individual, family, group, etc. And the common type of information included in case history are like basic statistical data such as gender, sex, name, like that. Okay, so basic data it includes, as well it includes clients history of services, as well it includes investigation which is pertaining to client's case, it includes investigation outcomes, it includes past and present treatments and or counseling sessions, then history of illnesses, complaints and their resolution, referrals, etc. Okay, and that's why here your correct answer should be 2, which is case history. And the other options such as inventory, rating scale, projective, okay, these are as well the techniques, but these are the techniques by which we can't study individual's personality by observation. Okay, and that's why the correct answer is 2, that is case history. Okay, next is name the method by which which deals with only one person at a time and promotes his adjustment. So from these methods, which is the method which deals with only one person at a single time, and also this method promotes his adjustment. So whether it is case study, whether it is questionnaire or clinical method or experimental method. So obviously students, now all of you understood that your correct answer over here should be case study. As we have seen earlier in this video, within the case study we are going to study in detail information about a single person at a time. Okay, and that's why case study is the method which deals with only one person at a time, and also case study promotes that person's adjustment. I mean to say, according to that person's adjustment, researcher basically do the study. Okay, as we know that what is questionnaire. So basically questionnaire is a self-reporting technique in which researcher asks the questions to the respondents and respondents themselves gives the answers to the researcher. Okay, within the clinical method, so basically this is the method which is used in clinical areas such as within the laboratory or within the diagnostic labs. Okay, and in the clinical method maybe a researcher can do a study on a single person, and as well maybe a researcher can do a study on a group of people, okay, which has the common characteristics. Fine. And within the experimental method, researcher can study the relationship between the variables, as well researcher controls the variables in the experimental method, and here researcher statistically tests the hypothesis. Okay, so lots of things can be done within the experimental method, but your correct answer over here is case study. Okay, a researcher wants to study the association between gender and using a mobile phone. Data collected for this study will be. So here researcher wants to study exactly what is the association or relationship between the gender and using a mobile phone. I mean to say how much amount of gender, okay, using a specific mobile phone. For example, how many there are the number of female candidates who are using a mobile phone, and how how many there are number of male candidates who are using a mobile phone, and researcher here wants to study that association. Okay, so here for that purpose, what kind of data researcher will collect? So whether researcher will collect quantitative data or qualitative data, continuous data or classified data. So mainly students, there are two types of data within the research, and those are quantitative and qualitative data. So quantitative data, as the name suggests, it represents the numerical data basically, because here we give the particular values to the data sets, and we can measure here the data, okay, through those values. But within the qualitative data, we don't give the values to the data sets, and as well here the data is in the picture or word format. Okay, and over here researcher will collect the qualitative data, because here researcher wants to understand exactly the association between gender and using a mobile phone, right? And that's why here he will collect the qualitative data, which includes lots of experiences, behaviors of each gender towards the mobile phone. Okay, so only quantitative data over here is not sufficient to study whole thing, and that's why here researcher will collect the qualitative data mainly. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 2. Arrange the following stages of processing of data in a correct sequence. So over here we have given some stages of processing of data, and we have to arrange these stages in a correct sequence. So let us see what are these stages: coding, editing, tabulation, classification, using percentages. So basically students, whenever we collect the data, so after that we need to process that data for our further processes in our research. Okay, so in that case your first stage of processing of data will be editing. Okay, editing. So within the editing part, basically we remove the unambiguous data or the data which is unclear, and as well whenever there is a wrong information within the data, so we remove it. Okay, this is called as the editing part of the data. Then second is coding. So within the coding part we give a particular kind of a symbol to the data so that we can identify the data. Third one is classification. So after that we classify the data according to whether it has numerical value or not, or whether the data is in picture or word format, according to, okay, that. Then next is we tabularize the data. Basically whenever we have a data set, then we categorize the data in the tabular format so that it will be easier for all of us to understand the data, and as well we can easily mention the data in the tables easily. Okay, and the last one is using percentages. So whatever data we have tabularized, so basically we represent that data using the percentages. So by showing the data by using the percentages will be easier for the readers to understand exactly what amount of data is available. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 4, which is BADCE, because over here B editing will be your first stage, coding will be your second stage, classification will be your third, tabulation fourth, and using percentages will be fifth stage. Okay, which one of the following stages of the marketing research process is most expensive? So over here we have mentioned that different stages of the marketing research process, and from these stages which is the most expensive stage, whether it is data analysis, whether it is data collection, or whether it is developing the research plan or report writing. So all of we know that what is exactly the marketing research process. As the name suggests, it is a marketing research process. So in this research process basically we study the trends in the market. Okay, whatever there is trending in the market, and we study on that, And that's why over here the most expensive stage in the marketing research is data collection, because over here we need lots of data from the lots of amount of people, because here we are going to study regarding marketing trends. Okay, and that's why to collect the data we need a lot of funding. Okay, and as well here data collection requires lots of time as well. Okay, and that's why data collection process over here is most expensive. Okay, which data is cheaper to collect? Now which data is cheaper to collect, whether it is primary data, secondary data, new data, or collected data? Now within the research methodology, again there are two types of data, and those are primary and secondary data. So primary data is the data which is created and used by the first user. Okay, and this is the primary data because here first user collects or creates the data as the at the place where it is originally creates. All of you getting? And secondary data is the data which is created by the third persons or second user, basically second user or third person. So for example, secondary data is the data which is available on the internet, which is available through the texts. Okay, so this is called as the secondary data. But primary data is the data that first user collects through the interviews, questionnaires. All of you getting? And that's why here secondary data is cheaper to collect than the primary data, because within the primary data collection method researcher has to take some kind of an activity such as interviews, such as surveys or questionnaires. But within the secondary data a person need to only collect the data from the internet, from the persons, like that. Okay, so here secondary data collection method does not require any kind of that much amount of funding, but primary data collection method requires lots of funding. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 2. Next is, a researcher is interested in studying the prospects of a particular political party in an urban area. So what tool should he prefer for the study? So now over here researcher is interested to study the prospects, okay, of a specific political party in an urban area. So for that he needs to collect the data. Okay, so for the data collection, what kind of data collection tool he will use? So whether he will use rating scale or interview or questionnaire or schedule. So students, now here researcher wants to study the prospects of a political party in an urban area. So here there is an urban area, and as well there is nothing like work which is done by a political party. Okay, and by taking consideration all of these things we can understand that urban area is the area which includes a lot of population, and as well there is lot of population, so researcher can't takes interview, right? So interview option gets eliminated because it will take lots of time for the researcher. Okay, and urban area includes the people who are majorly literate, they are literate, right? And that's why they can answer to the questions whatever researcher asked to them through the online media such as internet, email, like that. Okay, and that's why over here researcher will follow the questionnaire tool. Okay, because it will be easier to researcher, okay, to collect the data through the questionnaire tool. Okay, and here researcher can't use rating scale because rating scale can be operated when there is some kind of work which is already done by a political party. But over here they have not mentioned us that a work has been done by a political party in an urban area, and that's why over here researcher can't use rating scale, but he can use questionnaire. And schedule can't be used because schedule is the technique in which researcher itself fill up the questionnaire. Okay, but over here researcher wants the opinions of the people from an urban area, right? And that's why he wants specific the responses from the people. and that's why to get the responses from the people itself, he will use questionnaire, not schedule. Okay. Next is, which of the following is not the method of research? Now, from these options, which is not the method of research, whether it is survey, historical, observation, philosophical. Now students, we need to understand exactly what is the method of research. So research method basically comprises of strategies, okay, strategies, then processes or techniques, that are being utilized to collect data or evidence so as to reveal new information or create better understanding of topic. Okay, and that's why whenever we see this concept of method of research, then you will understand that survey is the method of research, historical is again the method of research, observation is again the method of research, but philosophical is not the method of research. And that's why your correct answer should be 4, because within the survey we can ask the questions to the respondents and respondents give us the answers. Within the historical method of research, basically we can collect the data from the past. Basically we can collect the data through the people in the past. We can collect the data through the pictures or videos which are recorded. And as well, observation is the mostly used data collection method in the research, okay, in different kinds of research types, right? And within the observation, researcher can use somehow strategies or techniques such as participant observation is some of the strategy, non-participant observation is another strategy, okay. And that's why all of these are the methods of research, but philosophical is not the method of research, and that's why your correct answer should be 4. Question 1 is, suppose a researcher tests the null hypothesis through two-tailed test and another researcher tests directional hypothesis through one-tailed test, the difference is in. So basically in this question they have asked us that exactly what is the difference between two-tailed test and one-tailed test in regard to the testing part of null hypothesis and directional hypothesis respectively. So basically students, in one-tailed test there is only one end for alternative hypothesis, okay, and that's why it is called as the directional hypothesis, okay. But for two-tailed test it has two ends, okay, both the ends, that, and those are left and right ends, okay. And that's why there are lots of differences in the testing part of two-tailed test and one-tailed test, and those are differences in statistical formula, because these are the two different tests, and that's why we need to use different statistical formula. Again, the level of significance is different, and as well the table value that we use for testing significance is different. So basically all of we know that what is the table value. So basically there is a table which is called as the T distribution table, okay, and that table is for both two-tailed test and one-tailed test, and the values are different for two-tailed test and one-tailed test in the table, and we need to use those values for testing the significance level, all of you getting. And that's why the difference is in all of these aspects, and those are statistical formula, level of significance, table value used for testing significance, okay. That's why your correct answer should be 4. Next, a null hypothesis is, now what is the definition of null hypothesis? Whether it is an intelligent hunch about probable result, or it is a type of research hypothesis, or it is a statistical hypothesis to be tested, or it is a research hypothesis formulated for a statistical inference. So basically students, a null hypothesis is a statement in that we predict that there is no relationship between the variables under study. And in the research methodology we only test the null hypothesis, okay. This is the only hypothesis that we test in the research process, and that's why your correct answer should be 3, that is, it is a statistical hypothesis to be tested, because there are lots of research hypotheses including directional hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, which is also called as a research hypothesis, statistical hypothesis over there, simple hypothesis, composite hypothesis is there. But there is only one hypothesis, which is the null hypothesis, and that is only tested in the whole research process, not other any kind of hypothesis. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 3. When we reject the null hypothesis, we are suggesting that the treatment is dash the dependent variable. So whenever we reject the null hypothesis in the research, then after that what will happen to the dependent variable and independent variable? So whether the treatment is not related with the dependent variable, or whether the treatment is likely to affect the dependent variable, or whether the treatment is not likely to affect the dependent variable, or none of these. So basically students, there are two basic types of hypothesis in whole research process, and those are null hypothesis, okay, that I have given the definition for this earlier in this video, and the another one is alternative hypothesis, okay, which is also called as the research hypothesis. Because in the alternative hypothesis we predict that there is the relationship between the two variables, but in the null hypothesis we predict that there is no relationship between the two variables under study. And that's why whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then automatically we accept the alternative hypothesis, okay. And that's why here ultimately we accept that there is the relationship between the two variables. So it means that the treatment is going to likely affect the dependent variable. It means that whenever we study the variables in the research process, so basically there are two common types of variables, and those are independent variables and dependent variables, okay. And whenever there is a relationship between these variables, then obviously independent variable is the cause variable, so it causes some effects in the dependent variable. So whenever we alter the values of independent variables, then obviously it will affect the values of the dependent variable. So it's like that, and that's why whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then obviously we are going to accept the alternative hypothesis, and that's why it suggests that the treatment is affecting the dependent variable, and that's why your correct answer should be 2, that is likely to affect the dependent variable. Which of the following outcomes is reflected when we fail to reject a false null hypothesis? So whenever we fail to reject a false null hypothesis, then what will happen? So whether there will be type 2 error or there will be type 1 error, or when there is both types of errors, and those are type 1 and type 2 error, or none of these. So students, basically there are two types of errors in the whole null hypothesis testing part, and those are type 1 error and type 2 error, okay. So within the type 1 error, when it will happen, or what is the outcome? So basically whenever there is null hypothesis, okay, and you are going to reject the null hypothesis, though it is true, okay, this null hypothesis is true, but still I am going to reject it. So in that case type 1 error will happen. And in what situation type 2 error happens? So whenever there is a null hypothesis, okay, and this null hypothesis is false, but I am not going to reject it, so I am going to accept it, okay. So in this situation basically type 2 error happens, and that's why the above situation in the question is basically the type 2 error, okay, because here the null hypothesis is false, but we are failing to reject it. It means that the null hypothesis is false, but we are accepting it, okay, and that's why in this situation your outcome will be type 2 error, okay. And I want to tell you one thing, that students, in the research methodology part, okay, either type 2 error will happen or type 1 error will happen, okay. Both the types of error and those are type 1 and type 2 error will not happen simultaneously in one research process. So understand this thing, students, okay, and that's why your correct answer should be either type 2 error or type 1 error. So you need to eliminate this option as a whole, okay, whenever such kinds of question will asked in your entrance exam, Okay, and that's why in this situation type 2 error is occurring. Which of the following is correct while conducting a test of significance? So whenever I am doing a test of significance, then okay, which of these following options are correct? So alpha is the probability of finding a significant correlation or difference erroneously by chance alone. Alpha should be set by the experimenter before the experiment. Alpha values are often set to 0.05 or 0.01, but there is nothing sacred about these numbers, all of these. So basically students, test of significance means what? So basically test of significance is nothing but you are testing your null hypothesis by using the statistical methods in the whole research process. Okay, and that's why what is exactly this alpha? So alpha is what? As we have seen earlier in this video that type 1 error occurs whenever we are testing the null hypothesis. So the probability of occurring type 1 error, okay, is called as alpha, and that's why ultimately alpha is the probability of finding a significant correlation or difference erroneously. All of you getting? Because this is the probability of occurring a type 1 error, and that's why ultimately this is the probability of finding a significant correlation between the variables or difference between the variables but by chance alone. All of you getting? And as well, there is some common values for alpha, and experimenter or researcher should set these values before the experiment, because they will understand exactly what will happen or what will be the results of their research. Okay, and alpha values are often set to 0.05 or 0.01, but there is nothing sacred about these numbers. Again, this statement is correct because the smaller the values of alpha, the greater is the test of significance value. So I mean to say that your test results will be more significant when the alpha values will be more smaller. All of you getting? And that's why all of these options are correct in regard to the test of significance part. Okay, now next is type 1 error occurs if. Now this is the easiest question. Okay, so whenever students you will understand exactly what is the type 1 error and type 2 error, then you won't fail to answer these questions correctly in your exam. All of you getting? So let us see different options. The null hypothesis is rejected even though it is true. The null hypothesis is accepted even though it is false. Both the null hypothesis as well as alternative hypothesis are rejected. None of the above. So your correct answer should be obviously 1. As I have told you earlier in this video that whenever the null hypothesis is true but still we reject it, then in that situation type 1 error occurs. Okay, all of you getting? And that's why your correct answer should be 1. Okay. A statement of prediction. Now here focus on the word prediction, that sets forth the basis for testing the relationship between variables in an attempt to link theory to reality is called. So from these options, which is the statement of prediction, and this statement of prediction gives us a basic idea, okay, for testing the relationship between the variables. And as well, this is the statement of prediction, okay, and we are going to test this statement of prediction because we need to understand, okay, the relationship of the theory to reality. We are going to link the theory to reality. Okay, so this kind of statement of prediction is called as what? Whether it is random sampling, whether it is questionnaire, whether it is hypothesis, whether it is assumption. So all of you now understood that, students. Now the correct answer is hypothesis, because hypothesis is the statement of prediction. That's why I have told you that focus on this word, prediction. So whenever you see prediction in the research methodology section, then it is nothing but the hypothesis. And one more thing is that hypothesis gives us the basic information, Okay, about what? About the testing of relationship between the variables under study, and as well this is the attempt to link theory part to the reality. All of you getting? And that's why your correct answer should be hypothesis, not assumption, because there is a lot of difference between hypothesis and assumption. Assumption is only the thing which comes after our intuitive thinking, but hypothesis is the proper prediction. It is a proper statement of prediction. This is not a intuitive thinking part. And as well, hypothesis includes the relationship between the variables, and as well this is an attempt to link theory to reality, but assumption is not like this. All of you getting? And random sampling is the technique in the research process, okay, by using which we are going to select the samples from the target population. And questionnaire is the data collection method under which researcher asks the questions to the respondents and respondents give the answers to them. And that's why your correct answer should be 3. Okay. Hypothesis must have. So hypothesis must have which kind of feature or characteristic? So whether it is testability, whether it is applicability, whether it is durability or measurement. So hypothesis must have testability. This is the most important characteristic hypothesis must have, because whenever hypothesis does not have testability, then how we are going to test it? By using the statistical techniques. And that's why hypothesis must have testability. Okay, and that's why we can test it by using statistical techniques, and finally we get the results. Okay, whether the results will be significant or non-significant. All of you getting? And that's why hypothesis must have testability. It should be clearly, notify exactly what is the relationship between the variables, and hypothesis, it should have clarity as well. That's why your correct answer should be 1. To test a null hypothesis, a researcher uses. So whenever I want to test a null hypothesis, then what type of statistical technique I should use? So whether it is t-test or ANOVA or x-square or factorial analysis. So in this situation, a researcher uses ANOVA. So let me tell you why. So t-test is the parametric test, as we have seen earlier in before videos, right? So this is the parametric test, and here there are 2 groups, group 1 and group 2, and we are going to find out the mean values of group 1 and group 2, and we are going to compare these values, okay, whether the values are different or equal. And by comparing these mean values, we will get the results of our research. All of you getting? And this is nothing but the t-test, and t-test is going to compare only 2 variables. Okay, by using the t-test we can only compare the 2 variables, okay, in a whole research process. ANOVA, what is this? So ANOVA is the extension of t-test. I mean to say, this is the test which is based upon t-test only, but this is the advanced t-test. Okay, and here we are going to analyze the variance basically. Okay, this is the analysis of variance, and within the ANOVA test we are going to compare the means of different groups, but here we can compare more than 2 variables at a time, and that's why ANOVA test is more favorable than t-test. Okay, and that's why researcher uses ANOVA to test null hypothesis, because sometimes in a research process there are more than 2 variables. So in that situation we need to use ANOVA, okay, than t-test. Okay, what is x-square? X-square is the chi-square test. Okay, and chi-square test is a non-parametric test, and chi-square test is done to understand the difference between the expected values and the values that we get through our results basically. Okay, and that's why to test a null hypothesis, researcher does not use chi-square test. Okay, researcher uses null hypothesis. And what is factorial analysis? So basically factorial analysis is the technique by which we reduces a large variable into smaller variable factor, and that's why it is called as a factorial analysis. So your correct answer for this question should be 2. Okay. Next is, if the null hypothesis is false, then which of the following is accepted? This is the easiest question, students. Whenever we reject the null hypothesis because it is false, then what type of hypothesis we are going to accept? Whether it is null hypothesis, positive hypothesis, negative hypothesis, or alternative hypothesis. So obviously students, whenever we are going to reject the null hypothesis and it is false, then in that situation we are going to accept the alternative hypothesis, which is also called as the research hypothesis, right? That I have told you earlier in this video. Okay, that's why your correct answer should be 4, that is alternative hypothesis. Start with our today's session. Given below are two statements, statement 1 and statement 2. So let us see what are these statements. The null hypothesis states that students will recall significantly more information on a Monday morning than on a Friday afternoon. Okay. And what is statement 2? The alternative hypothesis states that there will be no significant difference in the amount recalled on a Monday morning compared to a Friday afternoon. So over here students, we need to answer the question like which of these statements are basically correct or incorrect. All of you getting? And as I have told you earlier in yesterday's video only, that null hypothesis states basically about that there is no relationship between the two variables. Okay, no relationship. But alternative hypothesis states that there is relationship between the two variables. But if we read both of these statements, then within the null hypothesis part they have mentioned that there is significant relationship between the information on a Monday morning, okay, and on a Friday afternoon. So there is basically the difference, okay, between the information grabbed by the student on a Monday morning and as well information grabbed by a student on a Friday afternoon basically. But in the alternative hypothesis, they have stated that there is no any significant difference between these two things, and that's why exactly opposite statements have been stated over here. So in the place of null hypothesis, they have given the definition of alternative hypothesis, and in the place of alternative hypothesis they have given the definition of null hypothesis, and that's why your correct answer should be 2, because both of these statements are incorrect. All of you getting, students? Because both of these statements are incorrect. Okay. Now next is a hypothesis that states zero difference or no difference between the parameter and its assumed value is known as. So whenever a hypothesis states us that there is no difference or zero difference between the parameter and its assumed value, then what type of hypothesis is it? Whether it is simple hypothesis, whether it is directional hypothesis, or whether it is non-directional hypothesis, or whether it is null hypothesis. Okay, so as I have told you earlier in this video only, that such kind of hypothesis is called as the null hypothesis. So you can actually familiarize the word null. So the meaning of null itself is zero. Okay, so it means that there is zero difference or there is zero relationship between the parameter and its assumed value. Okay, what is simple hypothesis? So basically simple hypothesis states us the exact relationship between the variables. Okay, there are already, okay, whatever relationship between the variables already there, okay, exact relationship is going to be stated by simple hypothesis. Okay, now what is directional hypothesis? So basically directional hypothesis is the hypothesis which states about the result in one direction only. Okay, it has only one direction, and that's why this kind of hypothesis is tested by one tail test. Okay, and I think we have seen this test as well in yesterday's video, so for that you can refer to yesterday's video. And what is non-directional hypothesis? So this is exactly opposite to the directional hypothesis, okay, because here the hypothesis does not state about the direction of the results of the test, and that's why this hypothesis is tested by two-tail test, okay, two-tail test, and that's why your correct answer should be 4, students, which is null hypothesis. When a researcher rejects a true null hypothesis in his or her study and accepts the alternative hypothesis, what type of error is likely? So whenever a researcher rejects a true null hypothesis and accepts the alternate hypothesis, then after that what type of error will occur? As I have told earlier in previous video, students, that there are two types of error occur, okay, whenever we test the null hypothesis in the research process. So those types of errors are type 1 error and type 2 error. So basically, students, type 1 error occurs when we reject the true null hypothesis, okay, whenever we reject the true null hypothesis, then in that situation type 1 error occurs, and whenever type 2 error occurs, then in that situation we are going to accept the false null hypothesis, okay, false null hypothesis. So these two concepts are really important to all of you, because on these concepts every time at each year you will be getting questions in the PhD entrance test, okay, and that's why in this question your correct answer should be 1, that is type 1 error, because the question asked regarding type 1 error itself, because here we are going to reject the true null hypothesis over here, and in that situation type 1 error occurs, okay. The probability of not accepting the null hypothesis when the alternative hypothesis is acceptable is called. So what is the probability of not accepting the null hypothesis? And in that situation basically alternative hypothesis is acceptable. So it means that here null hypothesis is false, and that's why we are not accepting it. Okay, so what is the probability of this kind of situation? So whether it is a rejection range, whether it is demarcation, or whether it is normative incidence, or whether it is power. So students, your correct answer should be power, because power is the probability of rejecting null hypothesis when in fact it is false. So whenever this null hypothesis, okay, is false, actually it is false in reality, and that's why we are rejecting it, okay, and the probability of rejecting this false null hypothesis is basically called as what? Power, okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 4, okay, and that's why you can also say that power is the probability of avoiding type 1 error, or power is the probability of not making type 2 error in simple words, okay. So there are lots of definition for power, but in simple words you can say that power is the probability of not making type 2 error. All of you getting? Now students, what is this demarcation? What is this? So basically demarcation is the marking of limits or boundaries. Then what is this normative incidence? So basically normative incidence is taken from the normative data itself, okay, and this is the data from a reference population that establishes a baseline distribution for score or measurement, and against which score or measurement can be compared, okay. And what is rejection range? Rejection range is also called as the critical range, okay, and this is the region and is a set of values for test statistic for which null hypothesis is rejected, okay. So it includes the values, and for these values basically we are going to reject the null hypothesis. But for this question your correct answer should be 4, that is power. Next, given below are two statements. Now here as well you have been given two statements, statement 1 and 2, okay, and we need to give the answers, basically what are the statements correct from these two statements, okay. Now let us see what is statement 1. Type 1 error refers to the decision to reject the null hypothesis when it is incorrect. Okay, and what is statement 2? Sampling error occurs due to the violation of the principle of random sampling. So basically, as we have seen earlier in this video, that type 1 error, basically what is that? This refers to the decision that we are going to reject the null hypothesis, okay, when it is basically true or correct. Okay, but exactly opposite is given in this statement. Okay, and that's why this statement becomes false. And what is the second statement? Sampling error occurs due to the violation of the principle of random sampling. Okay, so basically sampling error occurs due to the mistakes in the sampling techniques, or due to the mistakes in choosing the wrong sample size. All of you getting? So sampling error does not occur due to the violation of the principle of random sampling, and that's why this again statement becomes false. So your correct answer should be 1 over here, because both of these statements are false. Okay, using an appropriate parametric test in a research project, the researcher finds evidence to reject the null hypothesis. In doing so, which type of error is likely? So basically, a researcher did a particular parametric test in a research project, and after doing the parametric test, he finds the evidence that he need to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so whenever he is rejecting the null hypothesis, then in that situation what type of error will occur? So whether alpha error will occur or beta error will occur, or both alpha and beta errors will occur, or neither alpha not beta error will occur. So basically students, there are two types of error that I have told you earlier, and those are type 1 error, okay, and type 2 error. Okay, so again I am going to tell you about this. So type 1 error occurs when we are going to reject the null hypothesis whenever it is true. Okay, all of you getting? Null hypothesis. And type 2 error occurs when we are going to accept the false null hypothesis. Okay, so the probability of occurring type 1 error is called as alpha. Okay, is called as alpha error or alpha, and the probability of occurring type 2 error is called as the beta or beta error. But in this situation, basically researcher is going to reject the null hypothesis, and he is not going to accept the null hypothesis, and that's why over here type 2 error gets eliminated. So the only remaining option will be type 1 error, and its probability is what? Alpha error, and that's why your correct answer should be 1, that is alpha error. Okay, and as well students, both the errors does not occur simultaneously in any research process. Okay, so your correct answer should be 1. Next, given below are two statements, statement 1 and statement 2. So let us see statement 1. In research, null hypothesis when rejected offers the scope for accepting the alternative hypothesis or substantive research hypothesis. Okay, and statement 2 is when the null hypothesis is rejected, there will be chances for committing a beta rather than alpha error. So now the statement 1 states that whenever in a research process, whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then obviously it offers us the scope that we need to accept the alternative or substantive research hypothesis, and this statement is correct, because whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then automatically we accept the alternative hypothesis. Okay, because this is a rule. Okay, and that's why this statement is correct. But the second statement states that whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then there will be chances for committing a beta error rather than alpha error. But this statement is incorrect. Because as we have seen earlier in this video, that whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then there will be the chances for occurring type 1 error. Okay, not type 2 error, because within the type 2 error we are going to accept the null hypothesis, we don't reject it, and the probability of occurring type 1 error is itself what? Alpha. Okay, and that's why over here there will be chances for committing alpha error. Okay, there should not be beta error, and that's why your correct answer should be 3, because over here statement 1 is correct but statement 2 is incorrect. Okay, next, a research scholar finds through statistical analysis that the value of t is significant. What decision is warranted on the basis of this hypothesis? So basically a research scholar is doing statistical analysis in his research process, and after doing the statistical analysis he finds that the value of t is significant. Okay, so based on this value of t which is significant, okay, what decision he will take about the hypothesis? So whether he will reject the null hypothesis, or whether he will accept the research hypothesis, or whether he accept the null hypothesis, or whether he reject the research hypothesis, or whether there is no decision is warranted in respect to the research hypothesis. So as I have told you earlier that whenever we reject the null hypothesis, then obviously we need to accept the research hypothesis, and vice versa. And null hypothesis basically states us that there is no difference or no relationship between the variables, but research hypothesis alternatively tells us that there is a difference or relationship between the two variables. Okay, and over here after doing the statistical analysis, researcher has got a t value significant. So it means that whenever we get the t value as a significant value, then we need to accept the research hypothesis over here. Okay, and that's why in this situation we need to reject the null hypothesis, and that's why the two decisions is warranted over here on the basis of this hypothesis, and these two decisions are that null hypothesis should be rejected and research hypothesis should be accepted. So your correct answer should be 1, that is A and B only. Okay, next, hypothesis in research means. What is the meaning of hypothesis? As I have told you earlier in the previous video as well, hypothesis is the basically the prediction of the results of your whole research process. Okay, and that's why whenever you are doing a proper prediction, then this is a statement, and basically this statement includes a proper clarity about the variables under study. It includes the clearly definition about the proper relationship between the variables. Okay, and that's why hypothesis is intellectual guess, this is a brilliant guess, and this is an intelligent guess, all of these. Okay, and that's why your correct answer should be 1, that is 1, 2 and 3. So hypothesis can't be a negative guess. Okay, because if it would be a negative guess, then how we can test it? Okay, and that's why always it should be an intelligent, then intellectual and brilliant guess. A good hypothesis must possess the following main characteristics. Now over here they have given some characteristics of hypothesis. So we need to identify the main characteristics of a good hypothesis over here. So let us see different characteristics. Hypothesis should be capable of being tested. So it means that hypothesis should have testability. So we should be able to test the hypothesis. A good hypothesis can defy law of nature. So it means that good hypothesis deny the law of nature basically. Hypothesis should be clear and precise. A good hypothesis permits of the application of deductive reasoning. Hypothesis should be unlimited in scope. So basically students, as we have seen earlier in yesterday's video, that hypothesis should have testability. It means that it should be capable or able to be get tested. because we need to test the hypothesis so that we will get the final results of our whole research process, and that's why hypothesis should be capable of being tested. So this is one of the main characteristic of a good hypothesis. Good hypothesis can defy law of nature. So this is basically incorrect, because good hypothesis should able to clearly specify and permit the law of nature. It should not defy the law of nature. All of you getting? And hypothesis should be clear and precise. Yes, this is again the main characteristic of good hypothesis, because hypothesis should be clear and it should have clarity so that we can easily test it. Then hypothesis permits of the application of deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is the process, or you can say approach of a research. So in this approach, basically we have an existing theory, and based upon an existing theory we are going to formulate a hypothesis, and after that we are going to test the hypothesis by using different statistical techniques, and after that finally we get the results. Okay, so this is nothing but the whole approach of deductive reasoning towards the research, and basically good hypothesis permits this application of deductive reasoning for its testing. Okay, because without deductive reasoning we can't test the hypothesis, and that's why again this is the main characteristic of good hypothesis. And the last one is incorrect, because a hypothesis should be limited in scope. Okay, it should not have unlimitations in the scope. Okay, that's why your correct answer should be 2, that is A, C and D only, because A, C, D, these are the options which are the main characteristics of a good hypothesis. Okay, so students, thank you for watching this session. I hope all of you understood exactly what is the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. And one more thing is that research hypothesis and alternative hypothesis both are equal. Okay, because these are the similar phenomenons. Okay, the another name for research hypothesis is alternative hypothesis, and vice versa. Okay, so don't confuse within this. And one more thing is that you should understand the concepts of what is exactly alpha and beta, what are the type 1 and type 2 errors, and whenever the test is significant, then in that situation which type of hypothesis you need to accept and reject. So all of these things make into consideration. And after viewing this session, if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the comment box.